All right. So this is the final lecture of our planned course about the Angular, but actually, this is not the only topic that's will be nice to cover. I was struggling in choosing which one to present here. For instance, I mentioned something about the change detection mechanism. So it would be nice if you dig deeper into the theoretical knowledge. However, I decided to cover the most practical topic is the Angular form. Well, actually, the forms are the essential part of the application that process some data. Uh, let's say you're texting your friends, you're submitting an order or some kind of request. So you're entering some data, you're logging in into some app. So forms actually everywhere. And Angular has the built-in features uh, to create the forms and organize the entering flow using the built-in features and make more comfortable for developers, making them full feature, including some sort of validations, flows, setting dynamic forms, and etc. Well, so I would like to present a brief overview of the forms, and we will see how to create the form in terms of Angular. First of all, need to notice that there are several form types. These are the template-driven and the model-driven, or the most popular name for the second one is the reactive forms. What are they? So the template-driven form uh, introduces the mutable state management. Um, as you remember, we implemented at least one input to add to our list, and we have such control. And actually, this form is the template-driven one. So in order to pass some value that is entered into this input, we actually are changing the name of some variable in the component. Uh, and what if we'll have, instead of string, some sort of object? Let's say we want to do the following. Query, which is the empty string, and if you want to pass this name, we'll do the following. And actually everything will work as well as in the previous variant. But the most important note here is that by entering some data to inputs, we have to mutate the object by changing some of the properties. And that's why template-driven forms are about mutable state management. Also, there is some notes that everything under the hood are the asynchronous operations. And to get started with template-driven forms, we need to import the forms module. So as we did it already in our test app. So if we go to 2D module, we see that we already imported the forms module. Okay. So because the template-driven forms calls as template-driven, that's why the source of truth is our template. What does it mean? It means that in our templates, we define all the controls that will be used for entering some data. By looking through the templates, we can see that our final object that will be submitted either by clicking the button or hitting the enter key, the structure of object is formed by the input elements that are located in the add to do template. So this is our source of truth. On the other hand, the model-driven or reactive form has the immutable state management. All the operations are synchronous ones. To get started, we need another module that is called reactive forms module, and the component, our component class is the source of truth. And we're going to see how the reactive forms look like in a couple of slides. So this is the structure of the basic reactive form. Well, actually, each control, each input is the instance of a class. Let's say form group will contain the object that holds several form controls, and form array can contain any of them. So if we think about the values, the type of values, so form group represents the object, form control, some basic value, and the form array, well, obviously is array. Now, form control holds the primitive values. So let's go through the examples. Let's say we have the form that contains two inputs. How we're going to get started with the forms in terms of Angular functionality if we use either template-driven or reactive forms. In the template-driven, we're going to create some object that will hold every single value that is entered into the inputs. So here in our inputs, we define the two-way bind to some property of the object. And the most important, we need also define the name attribute, because otherwise it won't work. And actually the Angular, if you try to compile your template without the name attribute, will highlight this as an error, because the name attribute should present if we work with the template-driven forms. Finally, let's see how the reactive forms look like. Well, as I mentioned, in reactive forms, the source of truth is our component. So here we see by looking at the component class that our form has two inputs, and to bind the HTML elements with our form properties, we use the directive that is called the form control. So the name and the age actually will not contain the final value of the input. This is the object that contains the state of the input, whether the input is valid or not, and any other info. But just for now, let's say that we need to do the following, and during our live coding, we'll try to log to print everything to the console to see which properties the form control or form group will hold. Okay, so pretty simple for now. To explicitly to explicitly update our form state, perhaps we need to do the following, and this is the comparison between the model-driven and the template-driven forms. For the reactive form, we're going to invoke the setValue method and pass the object. And as for the template driven, since the source of truth is the template, we're going just to update our existing object with the values to reflect them in the template. Okay, so our form gets more complex, and some new controls were added. So as we see, the contact info has been added, and it will process the entered value as the object. So our object will contain the following properties: name, age, and contact info. That is the nested object. So how are we going to handle the following case? With the template-driven form, we're going to add the new directive and pass the name of the property of the nested object, and all the other bindings are going to bind all these models to the properties of the object form. So no major changes here. Looks pretty similar to the first variant. Let's see what changes are in the reactive form. As I mentioned at the very beginning, if we think about all the reactive form classes, such as form group, form control, and form array, the form group is actually holds the object. So if we need the object, we create the form group. And here we first, instead of holding the property separately, we're going to create the global form group where we pass some other controls in case a control will hold the primitive such as string, number, or boolean. We should create the form control for it. Otherwise, if it's the object, the form group should be created for that particular property. So is everything clear at this moment? At least about reactive forms. Oh, well, I guess there is no so complex operations here, so you need just to get used with the syntax of reactive forms. But in our case, let's move further. Let's assume that we have not only one contact info. Let's say we want to have the home number, the work, the mobile number, and so on. So the contact info is perhaps will be the array. And we're going to create all the numbers dynamically. Let's see how can we handle this case. So as for the template-driven form, our property forms is the array. And in case if we need to add the new phone, we simply invoke the create phone method that will push the new object to the phones array. And to reflect to the changes, we need a couple of changes in the template. So we need to define, well, firstly, we need to iterate over each phones from the phones array and assign each phone block to the model group that actually is the index of the array. And simply added the add phone button to add the new one. So in the reactive form, we need the form array to hold the array value for the final result. So to create the new phone, instead of the regular object, we need the to create the form group that will hold two controls that we've seen recently. And to reflect to these changes, we still need to iterate over controls instead of regular object. We iterate over controls and assign each of them to the index of the array, because in the reactive forms, each control, each single array item, which is the phone control, has the same name as the index of the array. So I guess nothing complex here. Okay, so we've created our form. What's about the validation? This is the essential part in forms, since we need to validate the correctness of the entered data. For example, let's say we are not able to submit the empty form since it makes no sense. And during the sign up of the new user, we need to check whether the username exists or not. So the validation occurs so frequently. So let's look through how to perform the form validation. All right. So maybe you're familiar with the form validation in terms of HTML attributes. So if you are using the template-driven forms, all the HTML attributes are supported by the Angular. And to make some field required, you simply add this built-in attribute, and it will work as in the regular HTML template. At the same time, to define the validation for reactive forms, I would like to remember one more time that in reactive forms, we define everything that is related to forms, including the listing of controls and the validation rules must be included only in the component class. So to define the validation, Angular allow us to grab some built-in validation rules that are pre-built with the framework and use it to validate the controls. So here we mark the name control as required, and we are passing all the validation rules during the creation of the form control instance. Okay. In case we need some custom validation, and this is possible, and in most cases, the built-in validations are not enough for us, and possibly we need to create our custom one. To achieve it, there are several ways. So here, in this example, we're creating the custom directive. Well, and at this stage, well, I would like to ask the question to you. So for which type of the form we create the custom validation in this slide? So you can either unmute or just post the answer to the chat. Let's have the little Q&A session. So which form is going to be used to apply this validator? No ideas? Yeah, exactly. So, and do you have any ideas why this custom validator is used with template-driven forms? Oh, no ideas? Well, remember that I was talking about the source of truth. Let's think about the example here. So we see that we are creating the new directive that is used only with the templates. So since the directive are going to be applied in the template, so this validator is created for the template-driven forms. And this is used as the regular directive as we used it before. So let's also to have a closer look at the implementation of the validator. So here, I would like to pay special attention to the return value. in case if a value is valid, we should return null. However, if some value or some error occurs, we need to return an object where the object key is the key of the particular error, and the value could be any truth key value. So why here we pass the value of the current control? Well, actually, if you don't need any additional data to pass to show an error, and you need just to highlight that this input is invalid because this rule fails, you can just pass the value true and assign it to the no integer property. However, if you want to print a message that the current value, which is the following one, is not the integer, so you can pass any value here. The only condition is that value should be truthy. And in case if no error present here, you just return null. All right, so moving next. As for the reactive forms, we simply create a helper function that accepts, well, actually, this function that we recently created is used both for template-driven and reactive forms. So if we look through this function once again in terms of reactive forms, we'll see that this is the simple function that takes the current control that is used to validate under this rule and returns either null or an object. So the function is pretty simple. And okay, so as you might have noticed, all these validators are synchronous ones. And also we can have the asynchronous validators. Let's say we want to check the availability of the user email or the username. So simply, if we just return instead of the regular value, if we return either the promise or observable, this validator will count as the asynchronous one. So it might be useful if you want to organize some asynchronous checks to determine whether an input is valid or not. Okay. Well, Angular has built-in CSS classes to determine the validity of a particular control or a form in general. So if we start, even if we start our to-do list application, and try to find this control that is used for adding to-dos. I remember we have one simple input field that is bound with the property of the class. We'll see some of the CSS classes. So in case you need to apply some CSS styles for valid or invalid inputs, actually there are several states of the form here. So if you want to apply CSS styles, you can use one of the CSS classes that are listed here. What are the other states, other classes that are listed? So as for these ones, ng untouched is marked to the control that is never been touched. By touching, I mean that we focus this input and focus out. So let's see. Whoops, sorry. This is what's going on? Yeah, understood. I has another Angular application that runs on the same port. So let's close it and continue. And let's try to inspect the following input. As we see, since the current input is the template driven, we have several classes: ng untouched, ng pristine, and ng valid. So if we do the following, we focus this input, and if we focus out, we see that instead of ng untouched, we see ng touched class. Ng pristine means that we didn't enter any data to the field yet, and ng valid means that the following input is valid. So in case if we enter some data, and even if we clear the data by pressing the backspace, we see that our form is still ng dirty. It means that we perform entering some data to the input field, and regardless of the final value, still we were performing entering the text to this field. So that's about the CSS classes. So I guess for now it's more clear for now. So this is the about synchronous and asynchronous validators that I was talking about a couple of slides ago. So I guess I covered already it. So if you want to make your validator asynchronous, you simply return observable or promise. I guess that's everything. Okay, and the last one I want to cover is that instead of creating the complex structure of the reactive forms by creating the instance of the classes, we can use the service, the Angular service that is called Form Builder. Actually, it provides more human-readable syntax for creating reactive forms and all of the instances of the listed classes that we considered recently. So there are several of methods that reflect to the names of the entities of reactive forms. And this is how it looks like. So we inject the service that is called the form builder, and to create the form, we simply invoke the method group and pass the object, where the key is the name of the control and the value could be any. In case we need to provide just the initial value of the control, we just pass the value, either string or number or etc. If we need also to define along with initial value of the control and the validators, we use the array. So as for the name control, this will be required. The age control has two validation rules along with required. We're checking that the entered value should be integer. And for phones, for our contact info, we initially create an array with one element. And in the future, if we want to create the new controls of form array, we just invoke the add phone method to push the new control to the form array. And actually, in the create phone method, we could have used the phone builder as well as on the ng on init. Okay, and from the template perspective, we don't have any changes if we want to use the form builder. All right. So as for the forms, from the theory perspective, that's everything I just like to cover. Well, actually, there are some advanced techniques in working with forms, but for a quick start, for the most cases, I think that would be enough. But in case if you are curious about the detailed description on how to work with forms, I, as usual, left some useful links for you. And the final thoughts before we move on to the actual implementation, I would just like to mention that if you implement an Angular application, the most preferable way of organizing the forms is the reactive forms. And in the vast majority of projects, you will see that reactive forms are used for any forms that occurs in the application, even if it's just a simple form with one input. Still, the majority uses the reactive forms in favor of the template-driven ones. So I would like to wait about a minute for your questions before we move on to the practical part. Well, I hope that everything is clear for now. So I propose to do the following. Still, we are working with our to-do list management app, and since we already had a look at the template-driven forms, I propose to create the reactive form for adding the to-do items. Well, I suppose some modifications are required. For instance, let's add a bunch of properties. Let's say that would be assignee. Well, let's remove everything from the mocked data. We're going to add a new items with a new structure. So let's start our mock server and modify a bit our Todo Item structure. So we're going to, so the typo assignee, yeah. Assignee is the person, let's say we have the cross-user to-do list and we assign our task to someone, just specifying its name. Let's say we want to have the due date property as well, and it will be string for now, because on the backend, in the most cases, we will. So let's see. Yeah, we are having the errors for now, but we're going to fix it shortly. I'm trying to explain the following idea. So the JavaScript has the date object that consists of several properties. However, if you want to pass the data, the date to the backend, in most cases, the backend programming language will not able to process the date object, and you need to pass the date in the form of string. And in the databases, all the dates are stored as a string. Let's see how it looks like to UTC string. No, to UTC, but to ISO string. In most cases, the date string will look as the following. So it contains the date and the time, if a time is necessary for our case. So our payload for passing the date is also string. Oh, well, I guess it would be enough for our purposes. So let's recreate our form. ID counter. So actually, that will be a good idea to generate some random ID. Not to waste our time. I will just look through the topic. I know that it exists. I will just paste the solution to our code. GUID generator. Well, that's, I guess, is our solution. So let's store it in the utils directory. Generate guid.ts. Okay, I guess it would be enough, and it will return string. As well as the following one. This is the good practice to specify explicitly the return type of a function, because the TypeScript is about types and documenting our solution. So it will be more obvious to see from the code which type of data the particular function returns. Well, you can even if you can just hover the function and see from the tooltip the return value, even though it will be better to specify the return type explicitly. So let's generate. So how the function generate GUID. It will return string, and instead of number, let's have a string here. So I propose for now to remove everything from on submit, as well as the following one, and leave the implementation empty. We don't need the following attributes and directives anymore, since we want to have the reactive form. Let's scroll down to the to-do module, and instead of forms module, import the reactive forms module. And we're going to create our form. Let's say this is our to-do form, and it will be the type of form group, since this is the object. And in most cases, that would be enough to use the form builder, since this is the most simple way to create the reactive form. So let's inject it. So inject the form builder, and on init of our component, or even better, let's maybe do the following. Let's do this in constructor, but I suggest to keep constructor empty and use it just for injection of dependencies. And in some cases, if you still need constructor and you can't use ng on init, so you can use it as well. In our case, we can use the following: this form builder group will create the new form. So our to-do item has the will have the following controls. First, this is the title. So let's for now just enumerate the properties, and we'll add validation later. And due date. So we have several controls, and to submit, we'll do the following. So since the to-do form is not the regular value anymore, we need somehow to get access to the value of the form. So we have such property as well. And so let's generate the ID of the to-do. So let's see whether do we have any other related errors, and it seems like no. And to display everything correctly, so perhaps we need some other properties here. So let's just create some few more elements. So we have the following properties. And if you remember from the directive and pipes lecture, we have the built-in date pipe that will perform the date formatting. And I guess that would be enough. Throw error. Aha. So about this error, well, it will be raised only in dev mode. It's, well, actually this error relates to the change detection mechanism. This is because I used the loading spinner, and since the data loads so fast, let's just have the following: the bounce time. I guess that will fix the following error. Yeah, that's because our app firstly sets the isLoading to false, and before the change detection checked, it's performed the new cycle of checking. We immediately change the value to false from true, and that causes the errors. Well, actually, this is not the critical error that are relative that something is broken, but it's the mechanism that will warn you that something in your app is unstable, and most possibly it requires some attention to reflect to it. So I fixed the error, so let's proceed. Well, so let's create new form fields, placeholder. So let's reflect our latest changes. Time assignee, and as for the due date, I propose to go to the Angular material and grab the date picker. So if you remember that we've chosen the Angular material, and if you create a personal project, so I suggest you to use the Angular material as the main UI framework. It has a lot of features enabled, components, and so it's fully integrated with Angular and developed by Google as well. So to use the date picker, we need the corresponding module. So let's import it. And to use the date picker, we need the following elements. Okay, so let's see what's the result for now. No provider for date adapter. You must import one of the following: native data or moment date module. So let's refer to the documentation once again. Date range, setting it, selecting date, or even better, let's just copy and paste, since with the latest changes we need some date adapter to it. Well, I guess import both that date picker module and made native date module. So let's import it as well and see what we're having. Oh, Yeah, we see the date picker works. Let's add the placeholder for it, due date. So I guess everything works fine. And let's bind all our controls with our reactive form. First, we need to define that our root form relates to the form group that is created by the form builder. This is our to-do form. And so let's define each of the controls. But first I will do the following. Form control. So in case if we need to pass the object that is the form control, we use the property binding. So that will be useful if you wish to pass the form control dynamically. If you have no idea about the name of the control. However, in most cases, just form control name will be enough. So let's do it. This title, assignee, and due date. Okay. On submit, let's, for now not to emit the event, let's just console log the whole to-do form. Let's see what's happening. New item assignee is Pavel, and let's set the due date tomorrow. By clicking on submit, we logged the full form control object, and as you can see, there are lots of properties here. We see that our form is valid since we didn't pass any validation rules. We see that the due date, the date object passed here. So let's look through the doc once again to see whether we are able to set the ISO string instead of the regular object. And expect. Well, okay. So I'm just looking for some built-in solution, and since there is no, we will do the following. Okay. Let's try to emit the value, but first we need to convert the due date to ISO string, just to be sure that the value is correct. And let's try to submit what we will have. Okay, we see that the post request has been performed. However, we don't see anything on the UI. That's kind of strange. Oh, let's refer to the Redux store. Well, we see that actually we have the item, but something went wrong since we have extra nested property by some reason. And well, let's go down to the to the to-do list page. Maybe we'll see that is loading add to do. So actually, everything looks good. Add to do success. Well, we see that everything should be fine, but still we don't see anything. Well, let's return to the item. So we have the input. As for the to-do list perspective, nothing changed. So let's try to find out what went wrong. Aha, assignee, due date, ID, title. Well, I presume some properties are missing. So we created the ID. Let's just add ID, title. Let's just remove this object from to-dos and try to add once again. Yeah, that's because the due date is missing. Aha, that's because I forgot some property to include. So seems that everything works fine. Let's make it wider. Item component. Let's have 200 pixels width. That looks much better. So we want the following. As some previous approach, we want to clear our form after submitting it. We'll do the following. We're just invoking the reset methods. Yeah, the form resets, and seems like the due date passes correctly. So let's add some new features. At least we need some sort of validation for our controls. First of all our controls are required. So we need to wrap it by array, and before doing that, let's just demonstrate that we are able to pass the initial value to the control. If we do so, we see that our control is pre-filled with the value passed to the form builder. So let's add some bunch of validation rules. So our title, this is required. And in case if we, well, let's remove the initial value. We see that even material recognizes the validation rule for the particular form input and adds the asterisk for us and highlights the input in case of validation errors. So, okay, sounds like plan. So let's have the following ones for all our controls. And so we see that we will not able, well, let's try to do this. So we're not able to post our data unless our form will be valid. So as you see, I press the submit button, try to press the enter key, and I don't see any upcoming request until I fill in all the data, and then everything will looks good. Okay, we see that reset actually will reset all the values, but we see that material still highlights all the inputs in red. And let's inspect and see what classes are applied to these inputs. We see that this input is untouched, pristine, but invalid. So this is the particular control. And what if we do here and just submit it, invalid, and this is touched. Let's try to do the following. We will mark the entire form as untouched. Okay. But still we need to reset. Okay, so what else do we have? Well, because the material has internal checks to define whether we need or not to apply the invalid styles for the form. Let's inspect once again. Untouched, pristine, invalid, and ng submitted. Pristine, untouched. Okay, that's could be possible problem with the material forms, since it has its own error state mixture. Well, for now I'll find out the way, because I was working with material a long time ago. So when I find a solution, I will let you know. For now, let's just keep as is. Well, so we've added the validation functionality, not everything, but still. Okay, we need to define some extra rules. Let's say that our title should not exceed 50 characters. Let's see. And we're not able to pass the validators as the following, because the third element of the array is supposed to be the asynchronous validator. So in order to do so, we define the second element of the array as the subarray. And in this case, let's see what's going on. This is max for the integer, max length. What we need is max length. So now the item, the input marked as invalid because it violates the following validation rule. So let's inspect what I'm going to do. is to inspect the form controls. What we will do is to do the following. Use the internal observable and perform the console log. That will help us to inspect the form. I just want to show you some internal properties. Okay, so if you need to define which of the validation rules fail, we'll get deeper into the controls. Actually, all of our controls are listed here. And let's see, assignee, we have the failed rule required for the title. The max length error has been pushed to indicate that this rule is failed, and due date has on the error subject the property required because we didn't enter anything to it. All right, let's print some errors. Actually, there are a bunch of let's see, changing when error messages are shown. I remember that there is a component called mat error. This is the full field. So let's see. Where's mat hint? Error messages. Yeah, that's exactly what I need. So let's try to use it. This should be used inside of the mat form field. For example, this error will be shown if the required rule has failed. And the second one will be shown if it failed the following rule. Let's see whether it works. Object is possibly null, so perhaps we need the optional chaining to fix it. Property required comes with index signature, so it must be accessed with required. All right, let's do this. And which object is possibly null? Understood. The controls, it could return null in case well, okay, what can we do? We can either get the controls by several ways. we can use get method to do the same. And which object? The to-do form is, well, it will never be null or undefined. And here the parse error. Well, seems like it works. Let's see. So as for the required state, we see the following message. Okay. For the second one, we don't see anything. Well, maybe I misprinted the name of error. So let's check max and the error max length. Yeah, this is the misprint here. So in case of other error occurs, we'll see another message. In case of no errors, no error messages. So all these messages will appear when all the controls will be touched. So, and as following, we can add the validation errors to any input field to show the user which data entered is incorrect and where the mistakes are made. Well, as for the form arrays, I guess everything is pretty similar. Maybe we can for now just to create some custom validator. I guess it will be useful. And if you remember, the custom validator is the simple function, and it could be created simply in the component. It accepts the control. And we can do just as the following. We'll just console log the control just to be sure. Let's remove the following console log from here, just not to mess up everything. So I used this custom validator with assignee, and I'm entering some data. And as we can see, our custom validator has been invoked upon the data change. And just to remind you, it should return null. Let's just refer to the so this is the validator fn that will return validation errors or null. In case if we return the object, we'll see even if we entered some data, this input field is invalid because we set the error explicitly. And this input counts as invalid. Okay, I guess that will be enough for quick start to start working with reactive forms. More materials you can find on the documentation. For now, for your understanding what the reactive forms are and how to get started, I guess this should be enough. All right. In case you still have any questions so far, so please, you're welcome. All right. Uh, I hope that everything is clear, and I want to remind you that if you still have something unclear and want me to answer a question, so do not hesitate to ask me anything. And my suggestion is to tag my name as the following. That will guarantee that I will see your message and will reply you as soon as possible. And a quick announcement for you that that was our last lecture for the course. But actually, there are several topics that I didn't cover since the limitations of time. Some of them are the change detection, how the change detection mechanism works, and this is it's kind of necessary to understand the whole mechanism. So I will post the recordings from previous courses just for you, and unit testing in Angular, because it's kind of interesting. The unit testing framework on Angular includes the test module that will enable you to test the components to perform the DOM testing, and if you will be applied to some Angular project, most likely you will work with unit tests. So I will leave everything for your self-study, and as for the lectures, that was the last one I want to cover. And also I want to highlight that today we've added the new task, the Angular task for you. So you can already look through it. And I will think on it, whether you need some sort of presentation of it. So the task will start shortly on Friday. We will start the task, and the deadline will be the 15th of January. So in brief, this task is about the online shop prototype. So we provided a brief description right here, so you can look through and get acquainted with it. As for the backend, we'll use the JSON server with mock data that is located in my repository. So you simply just clone it and get it started. It's will available locally, and For accessing the documentation, simply navigate to the following URL. My suggestion is to start reading the task requirements and ask me all the questions before the actual task implementation will start. Okay, I suppose for our today's lecture, we can wrap up. So wishing you good luck, and I guess talk to you later. Thank you for your attention.